What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Slow Restoration, and as you can see, we have the wheel and hub off our trailer here, and that's because I was delivering the C10 bed and heard a squeaking. So we pulled the wheel, and this is what we found. So the backing plate, or the brake shoes, the friction material off the shoe completely delaminated. It's a little breezy today, so sorry if you get any wind noise, but the shoe completely delaminated, and that's the squeaking I heard. I noticed the brakes quit working near as good as they were, so obviously it's time to check it out at that point. But it just happened because if you look inside the drum here, there's absolutely no scarring, so that's all clean. So as soon as I pulled the drum off, the shoe was still in there with the friction material, and it just fell out. So as you can see, I have the whole assembly pulled off here. We're right down to the axle, and that's because for some reason, if you can buy the replacement shoes, and you really should replace this. This is a wear item too, the magnet. It's got friction material on it, and for some reason they don't really want you to do this because they price these out to where this whole assembly sometimes is actually cheaper than buying the individual parts, and you get the whole assembly. So obviously this has been off for a couple of days, and we did get the parts in. So let's go ahead and open this box up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as assembly. We'll set that down to the side. It did come with new nuts and washers too, which is good. Most of them don't actually do that. But here's the new magnet assembly. We'll have to make sure all this is bent around so it's not touching. These are self-adjusting too. Don't know how well that's going to work on a trailer, but it is there. Brand new shoes, and these are side specific too. So this magnet energizes. We go over to this drum, it actually energizes and grabs and rides on this flat surface, and that's actually what actuates your brakes. So once that grabs, it pulls this back, and as you can see, pushes out on that shoe. There we go. And which in turn pushes on that shoe and just activates your brakes. So yeah, these are fairly reasonable, and like I said, for some reason they price these out to where you can buy this whole assembly, in most cases cheaper, if not cheaper, than just a couple dollars more than buying all the individual parts that you need to replace them. So it's 4 nuts on the back side. There is how they come apart. They have studs on this backing plate, as you can see. This will slip right on, and like I said, they did give the new nuts and washers, which is kind of unusual. They don't usually include them, so I'm glad they did. We have our old ones here in case we needed them. But other than that, once you bolt these on, you're going to hook these 2 wires up to your existing wiring that came on the trailer, and I'll go over that in a little bit more detail, but that's pretty much in short how these things work. So let's go ahead and slip that on. We'll get the nut spun on the back, and we'll be well on our way to getting this side at least done. Once that's cleaned off, like I said, there's 4 studs on the back side here. Just simply line them up, and that slips right on. Now of course that was sped up a little bit because I already had the old backing plate off, but you can see there's really, besides looking and make sure nothing got damaged or knocked out of place during shipment, once you bolt these on, you're ready for your drum and you're ready to go back in service. Now, as I mentioned, these are side specific, and a quick way of telling whether you have the right side, besides the tag with the part number, it says left or right hand side, is the back shoe towards the rear of the trailer is always going to be longer than the front shoe. You can see how that one stops a little short at the top there, and this one comes all the way to the top of the shoe. So there is a smaller shoe in the front of the trailer. So, and then the magnet itself, when it's energized and pulled forward, it moves the shoe. So you don't want to buy 2 of the same part number if you're buying these in not a set. if you need a left and a right, make sure you order 2 different part numbers, because there are left and rights. Now while we're over here, before we put that back together, I do have to actually hook up my wiring so that will work. This trailer for some reason came through with only the rear axle having brakes. If you look in through there, you see nothing because there are no brakes on the front axle. So in that other box right there, we do have another complete set. So it's actually got the drum, another set of backing plates, bearings, the whole 9 yards to put brakes on that front axle also. So when I tie the wires in for this side, we're going to run 2 more wires up. There's a channel here with a wiring harness. We'll run them up, zip tie them, and then hook up these front brakes too. So not a big deal, but I think it'll make these last a lot longer if there's 4 brakes on it instead of just 2. We want to remove the wheel, and this is what the front axle looks like. So it just has a spindle. It does have the flange, is what we need to bolt that brake backing plate assembly on. So we're going to pop the bearing cap off here. There's a little retainer. Let me just get it off. I'll show you. Well, I did get that off, and that's what it looks like. Of course, full grease inside because we've been maintaining this. Spins nice and free. But we need to stop here on the front axle because I just opened that kit up and I accidentally ordered the wrong bolt pattern for the hubs. This is a 5-on-5. I thought they were 5-on-4.5. Didn't even look. I just thought I remembered the correct size, and I did not. So we'll have to get the right size in, but the short of it, I'll show you, is that one goes back together. There's a castle nut on here, a little locking pin. You bend that locking pin over, you can unscrew your castle nut, and then this whole thing slips off. Pretty simple, a little messy because of the grease, but there is a flat washer where that locking tab is. It goes right there on that flat. So once you get your adjustment, then you just bend that locking tab over, and that flat keeps that washer from spinning, which keeps that castle nut from spinning. So we'll move forward on the back here. Not a big deal. It'll just be back to kind of what it was before the pad failure, or shoe failure rather. And I'll get the correct ones in for the front, and then we'll revisit that. So with that being said, I'm not going to make another video on replace or adding front brakes to this front axle. Just know that it's exactly the same as replacing brakes. If you have that flange, it's just you're one step further ahead because you don't have the backing plate to remove. So once you get the spindle off, you simply clean that flange up, bolt your backing plate assembly on there, and then you're gonna actually ditch this, unless you have, some of them actually do come through with removable drums, so it's a 2-piece, so you'll reuse this rotor, put a drum on that, a slip over, but this is not that way. We will be replacing this whole assembly with that right there. Once we get the correction one in, if you look on the back side there, it looks exactly the same as the one we had on it before. So reversing the disassembly procedure, we slip the drum on there and roughly adjust your shoes. These are self-adjusting, but roughly adjust them so there's a little bit of drag, or there's not a bunch of space in there. So once we slip that on, the bearings are good. They already had grease on them. We repacked these not long ago, so we're just gonna top it off with this external grease fitting. So we slip that on. We'll take our front bearing and slip in there, get that to go in. We'll take our washer and slip on there next. And then here is that retaining washer I was talking to you about. So it does have, this is a greasy mess by the way. It does have a flat here, it has these 2 ears that stick off. So we're gonna put that on over top of the other washer, and that washer will not spin because of that flat. And there's 2 tabs here, so once you get your castle nut here, once you get that spun on and adjusted, then you can bend one of these tabs over and line up with one of those slots in the end of the nut there, and that will keep the whole assembly from spinning. Then we can top it off with grease, put our cap back on, and we're done. but I'll show you real quick. You don't want to just tighten this up as tight as you can get. You want a little bit of preload, but let me get this spun on, everything cleaned up, and I'll show you how to adjust that proper. So once you have that all assembled on there, here's the tab sticking out right here at that flat. We have everything snugged up, there's no play. We can spin that, you can hear some very light drag on there, but it does spin freely. And so what we're gonna actually do is take our vice grips here, or adjustable pliers. You can use a wrench for that size, but this works really well also. You're gonna take and just snug that up and back it off, and then snug it up again just so it puts a tiny bit of pressure on. When this is all assembled, of course, when you're using this, the brakes will heat up and expand all that a little bit. So if you put it too tight, it's going to squeeze down and burn the bearings up. Too loose, and then it's got a bunch of play in there. So it is a little bit normal when these are cold to jack it up and get a tiny bit of play out of your wheel bearing. Shouldn't be excessive at all, but it should spin very, very freely also. So once we get that adjusted, then we'll just, sometimes you have to back them off a little bit more than you'd like just to reach this next notch, but you're talking very, very minimal. So once we have that adjusted, we'll bend that tab over, lock it in, and then with the cap off, we're actually going to go ahead and grease this so we can see all that fresh grease squeezing out of there. And then we'll put our cap back on, put our wheel back on, and this side will be completed. We'll do the other side, and we'll wait for our parts to come in for the front axle. And with the tires back on, torqued down, we're now ready to go ahead and take this for a test drive. I highly recommend doing that, just because if you need to jump in the truck, hook up to the trailer and go do something, it's a real pain when the stuff isn't tested or there could be an issue. Most of the time you're always in a hurry. So since we have a little bit of time right now, we're just going to go hook up to it, take it for a test drive, make sure everything's good, brakes are working proper, and yeah, as soon as the front come in, we'll do them. But like I said, it's back to the way it was now, with just the rear axle having brakes. So we're as good as we were before. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good day.